All right, good morning. So our topic this morning is self-acceptance. I have to say something that's been coming up for me is radical self-acceptance. So we're going to talk this is really just a perfect topic. I think I really operate from a place where the topics always speak to also where I am in my own development, because this is lifelong work, right? This is not something that I'm just preaching. This is stuff that I live. So acceptance is something that I'm currently really working on cultivating for myself. And so I thought I'd just start by, well, let's put the mantra in, because the mantra is always nice to have. So I accept all of me with love. I accept all of me with love. I just love that idea. Right? Like, let's just feel into that. Everyone, like, if you're on mute, you're all on mute. So everyone just say that to yourself. I accept all of me with love. Maybe say it to yourself 3 times. I accept all of me with love. Maybe put your hand on your heart. I accept all of me with love. That's a really beautiful thing. Can you imagine if that was how we lived every minute of every day, right? There's this opportunity to practice just feeling like that's possible every minute of every day, right? All right, so self-acceptance is the ability to embrace every part of ourselves unconditionally, right? That all part, that however we are, it's enough. However we are, we're doing our best. However we are, we deserve our love. So this includes our attributes, positive and negative, our strengths, our weaknesses, our gifts, our flaws, without criticism, judgment, or shame. You really, self-acceptance means you understand that you have faults and that you've made mistakes, but you do not let them define you, right? They are not you. They're just situations that have happened, or parts of you that, are something you can learn about. When we practice self-acceptance, we are creating a sense of wholeness and humanness that overrides perfectionism and self-criticism. And one simply accepts that we are who we are. That's so nice, right? Wouldn't that be nice? Let's do that for a change. Self-acceptance is really a key component to developing self-confidence, empowerment, success, and fulfillment. It is one of the pillars that I teach. It is so powerful, this self-acceptance piece. And it really changes us when we have this sense that as a whole, we are just a beautiful person, right? It is really powerful. So again, our mantra is, I accept all of me with love. So, I don't have a question. I forgot to write a question. What's a good question here? Maybe let's give ourselves a number out of 10, 1 being, I would like to feel self-acceptance, but I don't. And 10 is, I fully see myself as whole and human and love myself always. Give yourself a number in the chat. Nice. There we go. Nice, nice, nice. I love it. I just want you to remember too that other people's numbers are not your number. Right? So someone's 8 and someone else's 8 can be so different. Someone's 2 and someone else's 2 can be so different. And the other thing about a number I love, keep them coming. I love that. And the other thing I love about the numbers is that at the end of the call, it could feel different. At the end of lunch, it could feel different, right? So really using numbers to just check in with yourself, not to judge yourself, right? Accept that your number is just where you feel right now. Right, love it. Thank you guys for putting those numbers in there. It's just so powerful to acknowledge where you are so that you can pick and choose from the things that we talk about today to either evolve your number to something different or nurture yourself if your number feels low in this moment, right? Give yourself a gift of being able to take care of yourself in a different way. Just closing up my chat so I can see. There we go. Okay, so let's start with some practices. So for me, the first thing that we want to work on or develop in order for us to feel self-acceptance is be authentic. This was a really big one for me because I lived a life that was a facade for all of my adult life until 10 years ago. That's a long time because I'm 56, so you could do the math. But it was a lot of facade. I was a completely different person on the outside. And so how could I accept myself? I spent my whole life creating this picture for people of my family, of my marriage, of how I, that I was happy, all of this stuff. It was so fake. It was, I believed it, like that I will say it was unconscious, but it was also not real. It is human nature sometimes to act differently than your authentic self. It's true. There are different situations, circumstances, people where we find ourselves needing to be protective. Maybe even we are fearful, right? Because we feel exposed or vulnerable to show our true selves. Knowing who you are and showing up as you is one of the most powerful ways to begin to accept yourself as is. You're going to hear the phrase as is a lot because that's really what self-acceptance is all about, loving yourself as is. So I want you to practice recognizing when you feel yourself putting on different hats, and I use that like, hats, to please others or feel like you fit in. Because belonging is such a big part of how we operate as humans. We want so badly to feel like we fit in. So often we will not be ourselves because we think other people need us to do or be a different way, right? And so we put on that hat of like, I'm fun Carla, or I'm pious Carla, or whatever Carla, right? And with different people, right? So if you can start to notice when you're because that self-awareness piece, that self-awareness is 50% of it. Noticing is the biggest first step. So when you can notice that you're putting on all those hats, right? See if you can start to retire them one hat at a time. So first notice them. Oh, when I'm with my mom, I tend to be passive and put that hat on where I just sit and wallflower and make sure that I don't get in any arguments with her because I can't handle that, right? Instead of creating boundaries, take the hat off, right? How can I retire that hat of being this way with a person, right? Or in a situation or at work or whatever it is, right? I used to have a full persona for the schoolyard when my kids were all in school. That was like super social, super helpful. Not that I'm not those things, but it was like over the top, right? And then I get home and be exhausted, right? Because I had played this role. So I want you to start with people who feel the safest and easiest to be yourself with, right? So you don't want to start maybe with the hardest place where you feel inauthentic, right? Because then it's going to feel, there's going to be all sorts of stuff going on that halts you from, your inner critic's going to go wild, you're definitely going to feel guilty or whatever things come up for you, right? You'll feel very vulnerable. So really start with a friend, your partner, a kid, that your kid, whatever, just any kid. No, I'm kidding. Your kids, whatever it is, right? And whoever it is, or whatever situation that feels like, I remember one of the first things that I did where I like kind of stood in my truth was with an organization that I was doing volunteer work for. Right. So it was a place where I was already giving so much. And so it was an easy place to start to be myself and say, I have to say no more often. I have to, step down from this role. I'm going to tell you that I'm exhausted and maybe going through a divorce and all of the things that were happening at that time, right? So just being true to myself, be authentic. Number 2, be honest with yourself in your reflections. This was key for me. Again, it's a lot of noticing, right? Journaling is the daily practice that really helped me with radical self-acceptance. At first, I wrote about myself only on the surface, right? We write and we're just writing circumstances or how other people are pissing us off, right? We spend a lot of time not writing about ourselves. So that's the first place, go deeper, right? With consistent entries came more and more honesty and vulnerability, right? So the more I wrote, the easier it was to stop staying in that place where it was all superficial. And then the next thing that happened for me is that once I got deeper, I started being overly critical of myself in my journal. So I would write all the things that were just completely wrong with me, which is ridiculous, right? Call out that mean self, right? When you're writing in your journal. So I would literally scratch, like cross out when I was mean to myself, right? We want to not just scratch the surface. We want to dig deeper. And we also want to be really honest about our life, right? The more honest we can be about our life, the more accepting you'll be about yourself and how you show up in it, in the world, right? So in your journaling, I really want you to notice that you're not going deep, or that you are, and that if you're going deep, that you're not being mean, that there's a kind, gentle way for you to write about your life that's true, but not cruel, right? It's really important. We can talk more about journaling at the end if you have questions. Number 3, name your natural gifts and talents. You are a unique human, period. One of the ways I countered my negative self-talk was by acknowledging what made me special. So one of the things at the very beginning, when I was really low and felt very vulnerable and raw, I just kept reminding myself what an incredible mom I was. That was something I knew that I was doing right. And I used like swear words and called myself, like I really made myself know that I was a amazing mom. So I said that to myself all the time, like all the time, so that I could remember something good that I was doing, because at that time it really felt low. So if you're at a really, really low point, acknowledge to yourself the one thing that you can actually admit is great about you, because there's tons of things that are great about you, but it's hard to see sometimes when you're in that dark place. So what is one thing that you are proud of about how you show up in the world? Once you know, right? Once we acknowledge something is true, it is impossible to unknow it. So when I acknowledged that I was a great mom, I can't now go into my journal and write, oh, I'm such a crappy mom, because I know it's not true. If I do write that, I have to cross that out and go, that's BS, because I know I'm a good mom. And that's how you start to change how your brain is wired, by acknowledging things, pointing them out when you say the opposite or something different, right? And then really embracing this idea that you can't unknow something you know, right? Once you know it, you know it. You can still make a mistake, because I could make mom mistakes, but I still knew that even those mistakes were made from a place where I was amazing at being a mom. If you acknowledge you are, oh, I just said that, sorry. So it's really hard for your inner critic to infiltrate a belief, right? Once you know that something's true. I want right now for everyone to write down, I saw someone did that. Everyone write 2 things that are your natural gifts and talents. Just to remind yourself. Good volunteer. I think that's what that one is. Yes. Perfect. Artistic. I'm a great communicator. I love using words that describe the thing as well. So use really flowery, big, positive words if you can. I love it. Anyone else? Good. Creative. Oh, they're going fast now. I get along with animals. I'm honest and flexible. Beautiful smile. Investigative and researcher. I'm a great connector. Creative and motivated. Great baker and love to talk. Love that. I am an amazing leader. Excellent. Okay, that's your truth right there. I am resourceful. Love it. I want you to just, I ask this often, and I don't know if you always put in the same thing. If you always put in the same thing, you're reinforcing that idea that you know it, which is amazing. If you're putting new things in, then you're building your list, right? Either way, both of those things are powerful. So even if you've if I've asked you that and you've put the same 2 words in every single time you've been asked that question, cheer on yourself right now. Celebrate yourself that those 2 things are powerfully your thing. They make you unique. It's like how that was what I could say. I'm an amazing mom. That's all I could say, for real, right? And then they started to grow. And so start with whatever feels authentic. I'm open and caring. And I love the support in here. I'm just going to read this. Being authentic will attract people that have similar values to you. Sometimes we try to fit in places, group of people that don't share the same values. People are different. And this just brings heaviness and internal conflict. It is so good to be yourself and true to your essence and your values. That's number 8. You're right. I totally agree with that. It's so powerful, right? And all of these things are interconnected. Being authentic helps you to be true to your values, which helps you to be honest with yourself, which helps you know what your natural gifts are. These all intertwine, right? And they're foundational. And that's why I always suggest, if you pick one, what's amazing is others will blossom. You just have to work on one place that feels like it's gonna nurture you, right? Nourish you. What feels like does journaling feel like it's going to nourish you? Start there. Does, talking to someone professionally feel like it's going to nourish you? Start there. Does making a list of your natural gifts and talents and posting them on your office wall feel like it's going to nourish you? Start there, right? None of these things are like an order. They're just a place that you're working within your own development, your own evolution, what feels good. All right. Acceptance is about understanding yourself as a whole and all the parts that make you up, right? Make up that whole. You've spent your adult life pointing out all of your flaws. Yes, everyone who's done that for a long, long time, right? You point out your shortcomings. Thank you. Yes, you point out your faults. It's time to balance that with what makes you amazing, right? So much of the work around self-love is countering the way you've been most of your adult life. If you've been self-critical, a people pleaser, putting yourself down, creating shame, like situations where instead of feeling guilty about making a mistake, you turn it into shame. You've spent a lot of time being mean to yourself, being hard on yourself. If you can balance that even a little bit, tip the scales a tiny bit to start and just figure out what is amazing about you, I promise you, maybe it feels a little flip or too easy, but I promise you it starts to shift the way you see yourself. And when that happens, so many things can change, right? You stop self-sabotaging. You start noticing your inner critic and start rewiring the way you talk to yourself. You stop procrastinating. You have more self-confidence because you believe in yourself, because you're literally telling yourself you're great, right? This is what self-acceptance brings. I am joyful, compassionate, and kind, and now attract those types of people to me. So many changes over the past 8 to 9 months. I love it. And that's an example right there of how consistency, it doesn't mean perfection, consistency in choosing yourself as a priority, right? Your self-growth, your love of yourself shifts. It starts to shift everything, right? How you show up in your relationships, how you work, how you interact, what your beliefs are. Everything starts to change. But there's a big piece there that's around the action. So that's why we always have all of these practices, so that you can just start making an action step. Number 4, become friends with a mirror. Mirror work has changed my life, for real. One of the places we are most judgmental and harsh with ourselves is in our bodies. I was just at a beautiful event. I went to a gala fundraiser on the last week for a place here in Toronto called Sheena's Place. And it's a organization that helps people who have eating disorders. And it was incredible. The different speakers who got up and shared their stories and how incredibly healed they are from this stuff. And I was talking to the director of the whole program, and we were just I was talking about with him, I wore this dress that I love, that I got in New York City with my boys. They picked it out for me, and we were there for New Year's Eve, just before the pandemic actually, and I was doing a speaking engagement here in Toronto, and I didn't really have anything new to wear or whatever, and I wanted a new dress. And so we were at Macy's, and we were going up I was just showing them, I don't know if you've been to New York, and the Macy's, they have a old wooden escalator, which I love, and so we were going up that just so that they could see it, because some of my boys had not been to New York before. And so we get to the top of the stairs, and there's this beautiful red dress with flower prints all over it. And I'm like, look at that dress. I was so excited. But I'm like, no, I'm not going to try it on. Let's just go. And they're like, no, Mom, let's try it on. So I tried it on. They were so cute. At the time they were, they're all teens in their 20s. They're like, you got to get that dress, Mom. So I bought it and I wore it and I love it. And, the pandemic has definitely helped us all put on a few pounds. So I wasn't sure the dress was going to fit me. I have worn it once before in this time. And I was telling him how, as a woman coming to this gala, it's one of the first big events that I've done since the pandemic, how I spent the entire hour before we left working on not doing what I always would do, which was to judge myself so badly about how I looked in a dress that I love, that makes me feel beautiful and totally amazing. And so I really spent that hour, I was telling him, really talking to myself, telling myself how much I loved myself, how much I loved my body, how grateful I was for my body, how I've worked so hard to really make myself feel fit over the last 6 months, and that I was going to an event that was literally the opposite of this. And so it not only important, but essential for me to show up in a way where I was not body shaming myself in an event that was about women and men who had suffered so deeply. And so I was saying, women just struggle with this. And he just turned to me and he said, Carla, men struggle with that too. And I'm like, you're right. You know, Rob and I both had those conversations. He was like in a suit that he wasn't sure was going to fit. And do I look okay? And should I tuck it in? And da, da, da. We judge ourselves so harshly, right? So part of the way that I have really shifted this body love for myself is with a mirror. So I have only had in my whole career a handful of clients who I haven't had to coach around body image. I can count them on one hand for sure out of hundreds. Like, it's just unbelievable. We have been socialized to never accept or be satisfied with how our bodies look and feel. That's literally what society is like perpetuating, right? This massive beauty and wellness industry is constantly telling us that we need to be in constant self-improvement, and that unless we try the next best thing, we are failing at being healthy, beautiful, handsome, whatever, right? And that is what we have to fight, that obviously as a society, but also individually. So there's like this obviously macro and then micro piece. So the micro piece is this, so every morning when I get ready, I stand in front of a mirror and shower myself with love. I specifically notice if my eyes dart to a specific part of my body in a way that feels mean, or there's displeasure about it, or discomfort, or even disgust sometimes. And then I say to that part of my body when I notice where my eyes dart, or when I have a little thought in my head, I love you, right? And so I have learned to love it all, right? I will say at the beginning, I said, I love you a lot. I'm like, I love you, 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 I love you. Now, I really am probably looking at myself in the mirror, and I'm putting cream on and I'm feeling amazing. And I notice one thing and I say, I love you, because it's still there for sure. We have to, this is a lifelong, you know, and we're getting bombarded all the time. So just really loving on ourselves is so powerful. If looking in the mirror is hard for you personally, and you know this, at the beginning, it was very, very hard. You can start with like a hand mirror. You can even start with like a little pocket mirror. So all you're doing is looking at like your eyes maybe, right? And start there. Start in a small place, right? Looking at your face, and just tell yourself, I love you. And it might not feel good at the beginning, but it's okay, right? Loving ourselves is so powerful. Number 5, compliment yourself. I love you too. That's lovely. Compliments are a lovely way to build a person up, celebrate wins, and show your appreciation. How many of you are really good at giving compliments to other people? Hands up, hands up. Lots and lots of compliments you give to all sorts of people. I know it, right? But do you afford yourself the same loving kindness? Marissa, I love it. Practice telling yourself you are doing great, that you look wonderful, that you are helpful, or whatever other loving things you can notice, right? Imagine showering yourself with that same language, because it's really about language, right? It's about using your words to really give yourself a sense of how great you are, right? Each week I write a page of gratitude to myself in my gratitude journal. So I have a gratitude journal that's like this big, and I write in it every day a page of gratitude from the day before. And I've shared that practice here a lot of times. And once a week I spend it just writing about myself. I'm grateful for my ability to host, right now. I am grateful for my ability to write. I'm grateful for how well I'm taking care of my body, et cetera, et cetera. So I will just write all of this gratitude. And gratitude and compliments are so connected, right? They're like this beautiful, easy way for us to, because it's thankfulness and blessings, it feels a little bit easier than, say, I'm so great at blah, 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 because we've been taught not to do that, right? So gratitude is a beautiful way to compliment yourself, to see how really you've impacted the world, yourself, on a regular basis. So even if you give yourself one compliment or write one bit of gratitude, it's so much better than not at all, right? So practice just with one. Maybe at the end of the day, you compliment yourself. This is what I did incredibly today, right? Just before bed, give yourself a compliment about how your day went, about something in your day, how you felt, how you showed up, how you looked, anything. Because all of those things are, like the other day I was looking in the mirror and like, I am having an incredible hair day. I've done such a good job with my hair. It's such a little thing, but it feels so good to acknowledge that, right? All different things we can do. Number 6, take responsibility for mistakes. Put simply, don't blame out. How can you own your part in situations that have created discourse, discomfort, or difficulty? When we take responsibility for our mistakes, we can begin figuring out what to do next. Because part of self-acceptance is also those pieces where we show up in a way that we don't like, right? Self-acceptance is not just all, I'm amazing. This is the superficial piece. Underneath self-acceptance also is, I make mistakes. I'm imperfect. I do things sometimes that are not the way that I want to show up in the world. That's also self-acceptance, right? Humans are great problem solvers. It is part of what makes us unique as species. If we are in victim mode, feeling that the world is against us and that others are to blame all the time, we give away all that power to accept a situation, come up with a solution, and move forward. We give that up, right? If it's always someone else's fault, you don't move on. At the beginning of when I first left my ex-husband, I can remember really vilifying him. It was so easy because I was so hurt and disappointed and felt disrespected and all of these things. And I was super vulnerable because I was a stay-at-home mom who had to take care of these kids as a single mom now who had almost, had such a small budget to work with, all of these things. And he's living the life. It's so easy to vilify, right? So easy to see that. But when I stopped blaming out and started taking responsibility for where I was, how I got here, how I want to move forward, I started to problem solve. That's when I went to school and became a life coach. That's when I started, teaching my kids about money and how to save and spend well and create budgets. That's when I started doing all of my personal work, because I started to take responsibility for how I wanted to be in my life, not who was at fault for my life being where it was. It changed everything, taking responsibility, right? When we acknowledge our mistakes, we also see ourselves as imperfect, which gives us an opportunity to also see others as equally imperfect. This helps us to see that we all make mistakes, right? And in fact, that's part of what makes us human. So it makes you have more compassion, because if you can have compassion for yourself in those moments, when you get into difficulties or you see someone else making a mistake, you're like, they're also imperfect, just as I am imperfect. So when you can have self-acceptance, it helps you to accept other people and be less judgmental as well, right? So there's this beautiful, as we say, it's like the idea of when the oxygen mask on, you put it on for yourself so that you actually are alive to help other people, right? That's the self-care piece. That is the same with self-acceptance. The more you see yourself as imperfect, the easier it is for you to be in the world with imperfect people without judging and comparing and being harsh with them, right? It's first you, and then that gets to be rippled out into the world. Number 7, mind your thoughts. It is obvious that your inner critic is not accepting of you. No surprise there. It is literally the opposite of being non-judgmental, right? So it's key to understand and quiet those unconscious thought patterns that are constantly ruminating. So we want to unearth the origins of your inner critic so that it can provide you with important insights into when and how you were not accepted at some time, right? If you think about things that you don't accept, so maybe it's your body, maybe it's the way that you work, maybe it's how you are as a parent, maybe it's the way not being able to like be a good partner, all of the things, right? Whatever the thing is that you're not accepting about, start by asking yourself, who and when did you first start hearing those critical statements, right? As a young person. Because when you can delve into where it originated, you can start to heal that, right? Who said those things to you, or who modeled that for you by being the same way in their relationships, right? Or in their interactions in the world, right? So indirectly or directly, who and how did that get started in you? Because what happens is with our inner critic, there's a space where it's happening to you from the outside in, right? It's usually either modeled for you or directed at you. And then there's a point where, as a young person, we ingest that so that we can protect ourselves by first projecting it so that the other person doesn't hurt us in the same way, right? It's like a shield. Their inner critic is like a shield. It's just a really bad one, right? But it protects us at the time. It makes us feel like we're beating that person or situation to the punch, right? And so that when we can get to that place where we understand where it started, we can say, whew, that's not my situation anymore, and I need to heal that, and I'm letting that go. And you can do some inner child work. You can look, I love asking all my clients, when you can identify when you ingested your inner critic, when you started to be the person who said that stuff to yourself first, whatever age that is, get a picture of yourself. If you can find a photo of yourself and start loving on that little person. That's one of my favorite activities to ask people to do. Talk to that photo. I have mine right here. Over here, she's like 6. No, kindergarten, 5. And so I talk to her all the time. She sits on my shelf over here. I'll have to, maybe I'll post that on Wednesday in Facebook, the little picture. It's a great picture. So we want to make sure that we can get to that spot. Cultivating a positive mindset makes it so much easier to see yourself kindly and as a whole person versus picking yourself apart all the time about every little thing that you perceive is wrong with you, right? Which is what happens. It works. It does. I love it. Thank you. Love the idea about the photo. Excellent. That's what I'll write about this week in Facebook, my personal experience with my little photo, my little sweet girl. All right. Number 8, be present. Self-acceptance is about loving yourself in the here and now. When we can let go of holding on to the past, so tightly we hold on to the past, or trying to predict the future, which is impossible, it is much easier to see yourself as the beautiful person you are right now. Practicing meditation specifically helped me to become more self-aware and notice how I was treating myself. And it opened the space for me to start adding in new ideas, beliefs, and thoughts about myself and how I wanted to shine in the world. Right? And that included being radically accepting of who I am in the present moment. Whatever present moment practices work for you, walking in nature, yoga, meditation, breath work, quiet, relaxing music with a candle and a cup of tea, or any parts of those, whatever it is for you, to get in a place where you're literally practicing being here and now. It's gonna help you to really clear up all of that churning in your brain. My brain was like a hamster wheel on steroids. It was constantly going. I was constantly thinking and talking to myself and making myself feel bad and feeling like I wasn't doing enough. And it was just like that. That's what it felt like all the time. And meditation interrupted that. And so now I feel like my brain is much more like a lazy river ride, or a beautiful walk. It's so much calmer. And when your brain is calm, you can sort out what is not what you want to think about and what you want to focus on. And that's how you can create this idea of really being good to yourself personally, right? Quieting it down. Number 9, know your core values. This was mentioned at the top. Our core values are our operating system for making decisions. It's how we make decisions. When we let them run unconsciously, so we're not really paying attention to what our core values are, the default setting is a mishmash of yours and others' core values, right? The shoulds, how should I behave? Because this person, or you're not even thinking consciously, it's just the shoulds, right? And so you have that mixed with what you want, but that you feel guilty for wanting. And it's all of this kind of like, mishmash of ideas that are often in conflict, right? So this leads to indecision, confusion, or dissatisfaction when you're making decisions. So you make a decision that you're not happy with. So often that happens when you're unconscious of your core values. When you consciously decide to explore and align with your core values, everything becomes clear. You are super clear about what and how you want your life to move forward. It's like you've plunked in the GPS coordinates, right? And then you're just moving in this way that makes perfect sense, right? And other things are easier to say no to, easier to say that's not part of my life that I need to worry about. It's easier to put in boundaries. It's so easy to accept yourself because you know clearly who you are, right? With clarity, it's so much easier to be authentic and stand in your empowered acceptance of who you are and how you want to operate, right? So it's amazing how that changes for you. Number 10, release from perfectionism. Perfectionism is not a personality trait. It is not. Perfectionism is a learned behavior that is an inner critic archetype that constantly signals to us that we are not good enough. So stop saying you're a perfectionist like as if it's a badge, because it's not. There's a better way. Having high expectations, wanting to do things well, knowing that you work with detailed precision, beautiful. Beautiful. Saying that it's all or nothing, or feeling that it's all or nothing, right? That the only way to be successful it's almost impossible to be successful if you're a perfectionist. It is so challenging. And if you get to have success that feels like success, at least externally, you feel gross inside. And I know this, as I have joked before, I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist. Do you know? Absolutely. Have worked tirelessly to get out of the perfectionist archetype, for sure. It is our responsibility to turn the volume down on perfectionism. I did that one small step at a time. I will tell you the first thing that I started doing to get out of perfectionism, because I honestly was a perfectionist, like in a way that was really, it was so damaging and unhealthy. And so I needed to start with something so small, because it felt like impossible to stop believing that this was the only way to operate. And so the first thing I did was with my journal, and I started scribbling. I used to use liquid. I literally could be, is it called whiteout? I think I don't even own it anymore. I own shares in it. I used to use it so much, even from all the way from great, like whenever it was invented, right? I would only use a pencil so I could always erase things. I needed my notes. I color coded everything. I mean, it was through university, and I would liquid paper and have notes out so that it could dry. The worst was when I wrote on it before it was dry and it would be crumbly. Like that used to make me rewrite whole pages of notes. So the first thing I did was decided I can scribble in my journal. And so I would cross things out. Even when I say scribble, it makes me feel uncomfortable. I cross things out. No, I do scribble all the time now, right? So it seems so silly, but it was really hard for me. It was really hard to finish my journal and see scribbled parts in my journal and not rip that page out and rewrite it. That seems silly, but that's how much I needed to shift, right? But once I saw that I could live with the scribble, it allowed me to start working on more insidious things, the deeper, kind of more subtle things that were showing up every single day. Having to have, this rigid routine, I had like routine. We have a whiteboard that I have in our house, but when I was in my previous life, when my kids were little, we had I printed out every single day, here's how our day's gonna go, like by the maybe minute, but definitely the hour. And for my kids, it was like I was a sergeant, right? Because it felt protective for them. It meant that I could help them to really navigate all of the stuff that was happening that wasn't healthy in our house. But I was able to let go of things slowly but surely, right? Seeing yourself as part of the imperfect human family allows you to accept your flaws and other people's flaws as just experiences to learn from. Just as your wins and their wins are blessings to celebrate, right? So we want to just embrace it all. That's really what acceptance is so powerful. All right, that's what I got. We have a few minutes. I'm going to thank you guys so much. I'm going to turn off the recording and we can just open where is it? Oh, it's always in more. There we go. Stop recording. Yes.